The millionaire's son was blind, until he drank a mysterious liquid and the impossible happened. The tears had long since dried on Margaret's weathered cheeks, but the weight in her chest never lifted. Every morning for 17 years, she'd watched her son Daniel navigate their mansion by memory and touch, his fingers tracing the mahogany railings her late husband had imported from Brazil, his footsteps confident yet eternally cautious. The doctors had delivered their verdict when he was just 6 months old. A rare genetic condition, irreversible, complete blindness by age 2. No surgery, no treatment, no hope. Her husband Richard had spent millions chasing miracles across 5 continents, consulting with every specialist who would take his call. But money, for all its power, couldn't buy back the sunrise Daniel would never see, couldn't purchase the sight of his own mother's face that existed only in his imagination. Now, standing in their Connecticut estate's kitchen at dawn, Margaret watched Daniel pour himself coffee with practiced precision, and her heart splintered for the 1000th time. He was 19 now, brilliant and kind, having just been accepted to Yale with a perfect score on his verbally administered SATs. But she'd seen him late at night, sitting by his bedroom window, his face turned toward a view he could only dream about, and she knew the ache he carried. The one thing all their wealth couldn't heal. "Mom, I'm heading to the soup kitchen today," Daniel announced, setting down his mug exactly 3 inches from the table's edge, just as he'd trained himself to do. "It's Thanksgiving week. They need extra hands." Margaret smiled despite herself. While other millionaires' children were vacationing in Monaco or shopping on Fifth Avenue, Daniel spent his free time volunteering at St. Catherine's community kitchen downtown. He'd been going there since he was 15, serving meals to the homeless, organizing food drives, and befriending people his prep school classmates crossed the street to avoid. "Take Marcus with you," she said, referring to their driver. "And please, wear a jacket. November in Hartford isn't kind." "It's kindness I'm after, not comfort," Daniel replied with a grin that reminded Margaret achingly of her late husband. 3 hours later, Daniel stood behind the serving counter at St. Catherine's, ladling soup into bowls he couldn't see but could feel. He'd memorized the layout months ago: 32 steps from the entrance to the kitchen, 18 steps from the kitchen to the serving line, turn 90 degrees right at the second support beam. The sounds painted pictures his eyes couldn't: the shuffle of worn shoes on linoleum, the murmur of grateful voices, the clatter of spoons against bowls. "God bless you, son," an elderly woman said as he handed her a bowl. "The blessing's mine," Daniel replied, meaning it. He'd just turned to refill his ladle when he heard a commotion near the entrance. Heavy footsteps, labored breathing, then a crash as something, or someone, hit the floor. "Someone help!" a volunteer shouted. "We need a doctor." Daniel moved toward the sound, his hand finding the wall to guide him. Other volunteers rushed past, and he heard fragments of panic. "He collapsed, can't find a pulse, call 911. "Let me through," came a weak, rasping voice. "Please, I need to get to my bag." Daniel knelt carefully, reaching out until his fingers found what felt like a shabby coat sleeve. The fabric was threadbare, damp with melted snow. "Sir, can you hear me? What do you need?" "My bag," the voice wheezed. "Left it by the door. Green duffel. Please, son. I'm dying." Something in those words struck Daniel with a force he couldn't explain. Without hesitation, he called out, "Someone find a green duffel bag near the entrance." He kept his hand on the stranger's arm, feeling the man's pulse flutter like a frightened bird. "Got it." A volunteer pressed the bag into Daniel's hands. "Sir, what do you need from here?" Daniel asked, already unzipping it. "Inside pocket," the man gasped. "Blue bottle. My heart medication, please." Daniel's fingers worked quickly, finding the interior pocket, feeling several containers. His trained touch identified shapes: a pill bottle, something metal, then glass. The glass bottle was cool, smooth, and when he shook it gently, liquid sloshed inside. But was it blue? He had no way of knowing. "This one." He held up what he hoped was right. "The liquid," the man whispered. "But not for me. Too late for me, son. That medicine, it's for you." "What?" "No, sir, you need." A trembling hand gripped Daniel's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me. I was a chemist once. 40 years ago. Lost everything to addiction, bad choices, worse luck. That bottle, it's my life's work. Experimental compound I could never test, never get approved. It targets genetic markers, regenerates optic nerve tissue. I heard about you from the other volunteers. The blind millionaire's son who serves soup to men like me. Sir, please, let me give you. No. The grip tightened. Paramedics can't help me now. But you have your whole life ahead. You serve others when you could be anywhere else. This world needs people like you to see it, to fix it. Promise me. Drink it. It might do nothing, or it might give you sight. Either way, I die knowing my life's work went to someone worthy. I can't just. Promise me. The man's voice cracked with urgency. Daniel felt tears burning his useless eyes. Around him, paramedics were arriving, voices shouting instructions, but time seemed suspended in this moment between two strangers. I promise, he whispered. The grip on his wrist loosened. Went slack. Sir. But Daniel already knew. The flutter beneath his fingers had stopped. Later, after the paramedics had taken the body, after the police had asked their questions and collected statements, Daniel sat in Marcus's car with the blue bottle in his hands. The mysterious chemist had been identified as Dr. William Foster, once a promising researcher at a pharmaceutical company, who'd lost his job, his family, and his home to alcohol. He'd been living on the streets for 15 years. What do you want to do, Daniel? Marcus asked gently. Daniel thought about his promise. About a broken man who'd somehow held onto hope long enough to give it away. About the cosmic improbability of this moment. He'd read enough medical journals, listened to enough audiobooks to know that legitimate scientific breakthroughs didn't happen in homeless shelters, that miracle cures didn't come in labeled bottles. This was probably nothing, probably dangerous, but a promise was a promise. Take me home, Marcus. I need to talk to Mom. Margaret's face went pale when Daniel explained. Absolutely not. We're not letting you drink some random liquid from a homeless man's bag. It could be anything. It could kill you. Mom, he was a chemist. Dr. William Foster. We can research him, verify. Daniel, no. I won't lose you chasing false hope. But they did research him. Found articles from the 1980s about his groundbreaking work in genetic therapy. Discovered papers he'd published on optic nerve regeneration before his company shut down his research as too experimental, too expensive, too risky. Found a patent application from 1987 for a compound with the exact properties Drive Foster had described. It might be real, Margaret breathed, reading from the computer screen with shaking hands. Or it might not, Daniel said. But Mom, I made a promise to a dying man. And if there's even a chance. That night, in their kitchen, with Marcus and Margaret as witnesses, Daniel unscrewed the cap of the blue bottle. The liquid inside had no scent. He thought of Dr. Foster's last moments, of a man who'd lost everything but kept creating, kept hoping, kept believing his work mattered. Here's to keeping promises, Daniel said, and drank. The first hour, nothing happened. Margaret paced while Daniel sat calmly, describing what he felt, which was nothing unusual. The second hour brought a tingling sensation behind his eyes, then a dull ache. The third hour, Daniel gasped and grabbed his mother's hand. Mom, I see, lights. Moving lights. Colors. I don't even know what colors are, but I know I'm seeing them. Margaret sobbed. By morning, shapes had formed from the blur. By afternoon, those shapes had faces. And when Daniel opened his eyes fully for the first time in 17 years, the first thing he saw clearly was his mother's face, tears streaming down her cheeks, more beautiful than anything he'd ever imagined. Hi, Mom, he whispered. The media called it a miracle. Doctors called it impossible and demanded to study him, to analyze the remaining liquid, to understand what Drive William Foster had created in whatever makeshift laboratory he'd maintained through his darkest years. The compound worked, they confirmed, targeting specific genetic markers and regenerating optic tissue through mechanisms they were only beginning to understand. It would take years to reproduce, to test properly, to bring to others. But Daniel's first act with his new site wasn't to hold a press conference or celebrate his miracle. He attended Drive William Foster's funeral, which he and Margaret had arranged. It was a small service, attended mostly by people from St. Catherine's kitchen. Daniel stood at the podium, seeing their faces for the first time, and spoke. Dr. Foster could have sold his discovery. Could have used it to buy his way back into his old life. Instead, He gave it to a stranger because he thought that stranger might use sight to make the world better. That's not just a gift of vision. That's a gift of purpose. And I promise you, Drive. Foster, I promise all of you, I won't waste it. Daniel used his family's resources to fund research into Drive, Foster's compound, to help bring it to others with his condition. He established the William Foster Foundation, which provided services to homeless individuals, funded addiction treatment, and supported marginalized scientists whose work was deemed too risky by conventional establishments. He returned to St. Catherine's kitchen every week, though now he could see the faces of the people he served, could witness their gratitude and their struggles. And sometimes, late at night, Daniel would stand by his bedroom window, seeing stars he'd only imagined, seeing the world spread out before him in all its flawed beauty, and he'd whisper thanks to a man who'd had nothing but gave everything, who'd proven that humanity's greatest gifts often come not from those with the most, but from those who give without expecting anything in return. The impossible had happened, but the true miracle wasn't the medicine. It was the kindness of a broken man who chose, in his final moment, to offer light to someone else's darkness.